Hello, hello, and welcome. If you're new here, so am I. My name's Malin, like Melinda, but no duh. And today I wanted to talk about Helluva Boss, specifically their interpretation of one of the deadly sins, gluttony, in their character Queen Bee. Before I start talking about her, first I wanted to talk about Beelzebub in terms of biblical lore. He is originally known as the Lord of the Flies, and he is one of the most prominently known of the fallen angels besides Lucifer and then Leviathan being the other one that's commonly known. So Beelzebub is the third most prominently known fallen angel, known for, depending on who you ask and in which specific time period you are asking this question, Beelzebub is known as the sin for envy, pride, or gluttony. So today I wanted to talk about the interpretation of gluttony in other media and mostly in terms of what Helluva Boss is doing, specifically why they chose to write Beelzebub the way that they did in the episode that she is introduced, because I found it super interesting. Like Lust or Ozzy, Beelzebub interacts with the lowest class. She's seen in the particular episode that we are introduced to her in, hosting a party for pretty much no one else besides hellhounds, who are known as the bottom tier class in hell in Helluva Boss's universe. The only other people who are slightly above them are the imps, who are able to purchase them, or in Blitz's case, adopt them as their own kind of children. And what's interesting to me is Beelzebub's physical characteristics and what she chooses to do in her free time, such as hosting parties for hellhounds, aka the lowest class. So obviously she's very wolfish in nature. When she's first introduced, you can see she's got a fox, wolf-like avatar, and most notably, she has an aversion to overindulgence, despite being the manifestation of gluttony and abundance itself. She's seen in the beginning encouraging her guests, asking them, are you drunk? Are you having a good time? Are you eating? In the song Cotton Candy, she's seen manifesting food, making it bigger for people to enjoy. But towards the end of the episode, we see her with Blitz kind of going more terms in moderation and looking at him a little bit concerned because of his overindulgence now that he is negatively impacting himself and those around him, thus prompting her to ask Luna to go check in on her dad. And I found this to be most surprising, right? Because one, this is gluttony. Two, this is just a member of Hell's royalty in the first place. Why would she care about what an imp is doing and how they're feeling in the first place? So I think it's really interesting that the writers are trying to subvert the expectations that we tend to have in literacy for gluttony. Now, again, I want to talk about why that might be in terms of the choice that they're making here. At first, when I saw the character of Bee starting to worry about Blitz because he's starting to negatively impact those around him, it actually took me by surprise, and I wasn't really sure how to feel about it. I wasn't sure, well, does this make sense? I kept asking myself, why would Gluttony, of all people, care that somebody is over imbibing, especially after having encouraged him in a brief drinking competition between the two, awarding him first place when he actually had beaten her out. But now, towards the end of the episode, she's actually starting to backtrack on that, going, ooh, Luna, you might want to check on your dad. He doesn't seem to be in a good place. And so that shot up a flag for me, and I'm like, ooh, why are they doing this? Because I thought it was actually really interesting. Because one, subverting expectations of your audience is already interesting and enough. It grabs their attention, starts making them asking questions, like in my case. And now I want to dig in deeper and figure out what's going on here. First, one of the big questions that I was asking myself is, why give gluttony self-control? What are we doing here with that? Because typically when I think about gluttony, one of the first images that comes to my mind is the one from the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno, of the big mountainous mound of flesh beast monster that's covered in mouths. And in that layer of hell, those who committed the sin of gluttony are eaten, they're gorged on by this monster and devoured, digested by him, feeling this absolutely brutal torture, only to then be reformed once again so that he can consume them over and over and over again, because gluttony is never satiated, just like they were never satiated in their lives prior to coming to hell. Or The other gluttony that tends to come to my mind is the one from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Again, just this big, heavyset mound of flesh creature that's never satisfied. He's constantly eating, specifically humans in this case. He is eating human flesh. He's always hungry, always asking Lust, can I eat them? Can I eat them? And she's like, no, don't put that disgusting thing in your body. And in specific to this character too, his stomach is this endless, vast universe in and of itself. It doesn't have an end, thus explaining his endless hunger. It's never satiated. And so those are typically the images that come to my mind when somebody says the sin of gluttony, right? This cute, petite, pretty pop star fox is not exactly the first thing that would come to my mind when I'm imagining overabundance, overindulgence of the self. And so I really enjoyed not only just Kesha's acting and voice performance through the episode and the Song of Cotton Candy, but just Bee's fun, extroverted, welcoming, very friendly, and almost TMI, I'm going to share anything and everything about myself towards people. She actually reminds me of me in that case. Like, I never know when to shut up about myself. So I'm just like, I'm going to keep word vomiting at you until somebody tells me to stop. And so I actually really enjoyed that character. And again, in this party, Bee is seen filling her guests' cups with drinks, asking them to eat more, telling them to eat and drink and get drunk and have a good time. During her song, she's filling everybody's plates, and she has all this going on. And so I'm sitting there thinking, why? Why are we making this choice here? And for one, I think it's engaging for audiences because unlike the other sins such as greed or Satan, wrath in this case, she does fit her archetype and more. She's a fleshed out character. She feels more rounded out as opposed to characters like Mammon and Satan who feel more one note and just right along the lines of their sin and not really anything more at this point in the story. Now, if they're going to dive into it more and explore these characters further in later seasons, that remains to be said. But I'm strictly talking about what I have seen on screen up until this point. I also think that Bee is an extension of the idea of this duality that the writers are trying to explore, specifically when it comes to heaven and the way that their inner politics work and the hypocrisy that runs them, as well as hell's royal class, because they seem to have equal amounts of hypocrisy in the way that they run, in the way that they treat their lower class, or heaven treating hell, all this kind of stuff. There seems to be their foils of one another, and Bee seems to be quite the antithesis of the royal aspect of what's been introduced throughout this universe. And I also think that that's an interesting commentary to have, specifically, again, because she's even made fun of it for it in one of the later episodes in Mastermind, where I think it's Greed who says, you hang out with the lower plebes, specifically the lowest of the low, hellhounds. But I think Bee sees herself in the residents of hell, and I think that has to do with her particular sin and her fall from heaven. And so I think the writers are exploring a lot of that through her character. Which leads me to my second question, which is, who is Queen Bee herself? Who is she in the midst of all of this that's going on in a very saturated show? Now, something that I thought was purposeful and extra interesting and has to do with the characterization of Bee is the inclusion of her powers. Not only can she manipulate food, but she specifically has listed, if you look at her wiki, honey manipulation, right? And if we think about this show is based off biblical characters in the first place and characters in hell who exist in the Bible, we are looking at the lore here. Honey is mentioned a lot throughout the Bible, right? We talk about the promised land being filled with milk and honey, or when they talk about the sweetness of the Lord's word being compared to the taste of honey. It is a very sacred thing in the Bible, and so I think it is incredibly purposeful that Bee has honey manipulation, and I think that has to do also with her characterization and why she is the way that she is. And I think it also connects to how she fell from heaven and what the after effects are of that fall emotionally on her, because Lucifer seems to be quite isolated. He has a lot of self-doubt. He doesn't feel like any of what he does has any impact and doesn't matter anymore, that there's no point in doing anything. But Bee has turned around and has given her love and her power and her abundance to the bottom heap. And so I think that really has a lot to do with her falling from heaven. I think the reason that she fell in Helluva Boss's universe, maybe not in Christianity's lore, but in Helluva Boss's universe, I think that she was tempting humans, having them overindulge and going too far in the eyes of God or the angels, whoever's in charge of the political system in heaven. And I think she was cast out. And so she has directly experienced the negative impact of what overindulgence can do to yourself. And so I think that's why Gluttony in Helluva Boss's universe actually exercises self-control and moderation and a care for the lower class, like the imps and the hellhounds, because they remind her of the humans that she had originally led astray, leading to her fall. Now, none of this is confirmed in the show. This is just what I think. This is what's coming to my mind as why the writers are making these choices. That's just what's ruminating in my head and what I wanted to talk about with y'all today. My final thoughts is, honestly, Bee was one of my favorite minor characters introduced into the show. My favorite animal in real life are wolves. So getting to see a wolf-like avatar is already exciting enough for me. I love the sharp teeth. I thought the song Cotton Candy was a really fun poppy bop. I've enjoyed listening to it. And so I thought that characters like her really make it interesting in terms of what it means for the political system of the higher ups, what it means for people like Blitz and Stolas moving forward, especially given how she defended them both in court in the episode of Mastermind. Ozzy would obviously be somebody defending them, but the rest of the Sins would not be. So I'm interested to see how that dynamic is explored. How will Satan respond to Bee defending them? Hosting parties with her hellhounds is something going to come down, and she's not going to be allowed to be doing this. Is she only going to be allowed to associate with the upper class? What kind of implications does this have moving forward? And I still, once again, I enjoyed how the writers are exploring this sense of duality between abundance and moderation in a very interesting and creative universe that they've built here for us to enjoy and watch. If y'all have lasted long enough listening to me yap here, I am so forever grateful. If any of you were watching my previous Helluva Boss video that talks about Blitz and Fizz, thank you so much for being one of those people. I can't believe it popped off the way that it did. I am so grateful. I had a blast making the video and doing the literary analysis. It really makes me feel like I'm using my major and putting it to use 6 years after graduating college. I feel connected to artwork more when I start to break it down and analyze it like this. So if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a like or a subscribe. Please feel free to comment and add to the discussion below. I'd love to hear what y'all think about this character, if you liked her or if you didn't like her interpretation of Gluttony, and tell me why. Thank you so much, and I will see y'all later. Bye!